Hi, everyone. Um, okay, can we hear me? Okay. Um, Thank you, Patty and Tom, for the invitation to speak tonight about this project. I'm going to be talking about these group of oral history recorded interviews that are held at the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History. And they were recorded in 1978 for an exhibition there called Living on the Land. I'm going to talk about how my work and how to find them and listen to them, and my unique connection to the project. As mentioned, I have a personal connection as a descendant of the Alliance Colony, and in my professional career, I work as an archivist at Villanova University. So I'm going to go into some detail about what all that means. And my focus and theme is more behind the scenes of how the history of Alliance and the surrounding Jewish agricultural communities has been recognized and shared and told, and how this project is a continuation of that legacy. I'm planning to talk for about 40 or 45 minutes and then open it up to questions, comments at the end. So I'm sharing my screen and to introduce myself. This is a photo of my great grandparents, Aaron and um, Hanny Levin, who both came to Alliance from parts of then Russia in 1882 as children with their parents, listed here as first settlers of Alliance. Hirsch and Jenny Colton were Aaron's parents, and Israel Hirsch and Esther Levin were Hannah's parents. And Hannah's grandmother and Esther Levin's mother, Leah Levinson, also traveled with the Levins to Alliance. And this is my Alliance Colony descendant pin that I got at the 2018 reunion gathering that was held at Alliance, and was organized by the Alliance Colony Foundation and the Jewish Federation of Cumberland, Gloucester, and Salem counties. And I heard that there were over 450 people in attendance that day. So, and these are two of the programs from other reunions past. The first Yovel celebration was held in 1932 for the 50th anniversary or Golden Jubilee, and again in 1982 for the 100th anniversary celebration, and another in 2007 for the 125th. In celebration of the first arrivals in 1882. And these two programs were printed for the 1982 and 2007 events, but I was personally not at either of those. So these reunions and these programs are examples of this community of the first settlers and their descendants' efforts to actively recognize and celebrate and preserve their history. And there are many readily available resources, books, exhibits, videos that tell the history of these original settlers, their background and motivation for coming, sponsors and support, and the hard work to establish what we now say was the first successful Jewish agricultural colony in the United States, and the surrounding communities that sprout up after, and their eventual decline. And we now thankfully have the Alliance Heritage Center at Stockton University as a hub for collecting and sharing this information from its own and other multiple sources. This book is one of those excellent resources on the history. It's called Jewish Agricultural Colonies in New Jersey, 1882 to 1920. And it's an academic history by Ellen Eisenberg. It was published in 1995 and grew out of her dissertation at the University of Pennsylvania. In her research, Eisenberg consulted many libraries and archives, courthouses and government documents. She conducted interviews herself and accessed previously recorded interviews and written memoirs. In her acknowledgments, she thanks Jay Greenblatt, president and founder of the Alliance Colony Foundation, who was instrumental in organizing that 100th anniversary celebration, and others, for supplying her with information and a mailing list of more than 700 people. In cases where key persons had died before her project began, she acknowledged that Rich Brotman's 20 hours of videotape used in producing his documentary on the colonies in 1982 were invaluable as well. Notably, Dr. Eisenberg recently donated her research papers and materials from this book to Stockton University Special Collections just last year. And this is their collection guide on their website. But I am bringing this up because I read this book about over 10 years ago when I was in grad school for history. I ordered a copy on Amazon, as you could as well, out of personal interest in family history. And as I was reading it, I was surprised and excited to find photographs of my great-grandparents that I had personally never seen before. And I discovered quotes from my great aunt, my grandfather's sister, B. Harrison. I immediately flipped to the notes and bibliography section and saw that the quotes were from interviews for a Living on the Land exhibit held at the National Museum of American Jewish History, now called the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History. And when I asked my mom and family members about the reference, they did not recall much, and I made a mental note to write to the museum and ask about the interviews. Because while it was great that they were referenced and used in the book, I wanted to go back to the original and hear the whole thing for myself and my family. And perhaps there was some more family history that was not pertinent to include in the general history of the book. So fast forward through all of the reasons why I didn't reach out sooner, though I had thought about it several times. I was newly re-inspired when I attended the premiere screening of the film Alliance by Susan Donnelly at Stockton in spring 2023. And this was almost 2 years ago at this point. I went with my mom and cousins, and it was great to see so many people there who felt connected to this history. After the film, we visited Stockton Special Collections, where librarian Heather Perez had pulled selections of their materials relating to the film and the Jewish communities of South Jersey. One collection, which I was thrilled to see, was the Levin Cousins Club records. Here's a photo of us looking at the papers. And the other photo is my own, which shows the Levins at one of those family picnics around 1954. And I just love that these cousins made a point to get together regularly to document their meetings by taking minutes, that they saved these documents, that Elizabeth Posen donated them to Stockton, and that Stockton has since digitized the records. So the meeting minutes are now online, by the way. So I'm going somewhere with this. All of this is to say that there is a long history of documenting this remarkable community. And I am obviously a big fan of libraries, archives, and museums, or GLAMs if you include galleries. And these are cultural institutions with overlapping and intersecting missions to collect, preserve, and make accessible primary source materials. And I started thinking about what I could do in my capacity as an archivist in the GLAM profession to connect with this community more deeply. So, what is an archivist? Broadly put, my job as an archivist is to acquire, assess, arrange and describe, preserve, and provide access to archival and other heritage materials, composed of a variety of print and electronic formats. At Villanova, my department is called Distinctive Collections and Digital Engagement, which comprises university archives, which is the institutional history and memory of the university, special collections, which includes rare books and manuscripts, personal papers, photographs, periodicals, maps, scrapbooks, etc., not necessarily relating to the university history. The collecting area is much broader in scope. And also the digital library, which is where we create digital surrogates of these collections for open access. And there's also born digital materials, and those are things like papers like student theses and faculty research, podcasts, other sound and audio. We have an ongoing mission to identify and acquire materials that relate to underrepresented groups and complement the existing collections. And as part of this commitment, we also have a number of digital partnerships with outside organizations. Through digital partnerships, we have scanned and made accessible online select materials of many Philadelphia area museums and institutions, such as the Independent Seaport Museum, the German Society of Pennsylvania, Historical Society of Montgomery County, several area churches, and many others. So at the time of my visit to Stockton, I had been working on a project to digitize cassette tape recordings of Irish musical performances from the Philadelphia Cayley Group and make those recordings available online. Similarly, colleagues in my department were actively conducting and recording oral histories of Villanova alumni veterans for a project called Voices of Villanova's Veterans and putting those audio recordings online. So I remembered the interviews, the recorded interviews at the Weitzman, and I wondered and suspected that they might be on cassette tapes, but I wasn't sure. I finally sent an email to the General Education and Curatorial Department asking about the referenced interviews, if I could, one, have access to the B. Harrison interview in particular as a personal researcher, and two, alternatively, or in addition to, I proposed a digital partnership to digitize the entire collection of interviews, citing our work at Villanova, that we had the equipment and the software and infrastructure in place to share and provide access through our digital library. And I was sure that many others would be interested as well, and mentioned the crowd at the recent film screening at Stockton. Digitizing the tapes would also ensure their continued preservation by converting the audio to more stable digital format. So I was so excited when Claire Pingle, Chief Registrar and Associate Curator for the Weitzman, replied with interest. She also told me that B. Harrison had been interviewed along with someone named Helen Maisner. Did that name mean anything to me? Yes, that was B's sister. And that was a surprise to me because the book had only referenced B. I had no idea that they were interviewed together. So that was very cool. And here is a photograph of B and Helen and my grandfather, Harold. And the back of the photo says it was taken at Cotton Studio in Vineland, New Jersey. And I guess that this might be from 1915 or so. It's undated. It took some time, but eventually both parties formally agreed to the digital partnership. And in September 2023, we had the tapes at Villanova to begin the work. So the preservation. The Weitzman, established in 1976, currently sits in this beautiful building on the Independence Mall in Philadelphia. It presents educational programs and experiences that preserve, explore, and celebrate the history of Jews in America. In 1978, staff at the then relatively new museum conducted interviews with residents, past residents, and descendants of early settlers of the farms in New Jersey to gather research, as well as audio and quotations, which would be used in the exhibition Living on the Land, which opened January 20th, 1979. The purpose of the exhibition was to inform visitors about the little-known history and significance of Jewish agricultural colonies in South Jersey from 1882 to the present. It would use artifacts to tell the story, including historic and contemporary photographs, documents, various objects, audio from the many hours of these taped interviews, quotations from written and taped materials. This document is from the exhibition files of the museum, some of which we scanned and are also in our digital library, which I will show in a bit. So there were 42 tapes, and only after the work was all done can I now say that there are 74 interview parts or files. And what I mean by that is this would be one whole side or portion of a side of each tape. Some sides were blank. Some sides may have had more than one interview, in which case we would have saved them as separate files. And these parts made up 30 total interviews. So some interviews have 2 or 3 or 4 parts and some just one. There were 39 different people interviewed, and sometimes there were multiple people interviewed together. The work to digitize the tapes was done primarily by myself and my colleague Mike Skier. To convert an analog tape to digital format involves playback of the entire tape, or one whole side at a time, running that through a USB interface to a recording software on the computer. And we used Audacity software, which is a free open source program to capture and edit the audio and save preservation and access quality digital files. And since we only have one station set up for this, it's currently at Mike's desk because he is also working on other audio projects. We decided that he would capture and edit the audio. Editing was very light. It mostly involved cleaning up the sound and removing background noise and trimming blank spaces. After that, he would save the files in our shared Dropbox, where I would then listen to each file in its entirety and make notes to later use for description, to identify the speakers, and note if any additional edits were needed. Mike would make the final edits and upload the files to our digital library server. And I then enter descriptive and administrative metadata for each interview, move the files to their appropriate collection in the digital library, and turn them live. And there was no set deadline, but we had a goal to digitize 1 or 2 tapes a week among all of our other ongoing projects that we are both involved in. And we did just about do that, completing the project in August 2024 and returning the tapes 1 year later. So now I'm going to talk about that description and access. This is a screenshot of the collection in our digital library and the link to that specific collection. This past summer, Stockton hosted a book talk with author Seth Stern on his book, Speaking Yiddish to Chickens. And in preparing for his talk, he said that as he was preparing for it, he said he did a quick Google search for Judge I. Harry Levin, and he came across these 4 interviews, which I had probably only uploaded a few months ago. He said that he had never met Harry Levin, but had heard stories and wished that he had known him. And just that day, he got to hear his voice for the first time. And of course, so for me, that was really great to hear because that means that my work is working. So you can get to this collection in many ways. We've shared a link on several sites and social media. You can also get to it, obviously, through Google or other web searches. And that's because of the metadata or the descriptive data that I've entered. And that's the titles, the names, keywords, etc. So Mike and I used a spreadsheet to keep track of our work from the initial capture of audio to the final upload. And the first thing I did was create an inventory of the tapes. They mostly had last names, first initials only. Some had dates written on them, some did not. So in listening to the tapes, I tried to identify the speakers, their relationships, and their life dates, and when the interviews took place. For one example, the Stavitsky tapes simply said Stavitsky, but there were multiple people in the room being interviewed. There was Bessie Rothman Stavitsky, who was married to Jake Stavitsky. Her brother-in-law, Sam Schreiber, was in the room, and he talks about his Zager family roots as well. And also Rose Stavitsky was there. And that was confusing because Sam's wife and Bessie's sister was also named Rose, but this was Jake's sister, Rose. And also Bessie's daughter and her husband were in the room as well. So to help me identify all these people, I searched obituaries, I used Ancestry, Find a Grave website, and many times specifically for the Alliance Cemetery, and mostly so much. So I used this page, the Alliance Colony Genie page set up by Jarrett Ross. Any records that the Weitzman had pertaining to the interviews were from 1978. So I thought that it was important to research and add life dates. And what really stood out to me is that all of the main interviewees are now deceased. None survive today, I'm pretty sure. 7 died within 5 years of being interviewed, and 10 more within 10 years later. During the interview with my great aunts, B. Harrison and Helen Maisner, which took place on July 28th, 1978, they urged the interviewer to talk to Sigmund Steinberg, and she said that she would be speaking with him in a few weeks. And when she returns for a follow-up interview with them on September 5th, they talk about how he had since died before she had a chance to interview him. Though she says that she did talk to his widow, but that was either not recorded or retained. So I think that we are so lucky to have these recorded when they were. I'm gonna try to go to a live demo now to show you what you'll encounter and how you can access these yourself. I hope everyone can make their screens big and see this. This is the landing page in our digital library for this collection. And there's a short description at the top about what it is. Here's a timeline. Obviously, they're all from 1978. And the default sort is by title. They're all called interview with person, first, last name. You can change the sort. Date is all going to be the same. You could change it to author, which would be last name first. And the author being the person interviewed. There are some filters on the right side of the screen where it says filter collection. And there's a section for author, and this is where all of them are listed. If you click more, all of the authors, and if you keep going, you can do see all. And again, here's all of the authors or interviewees, and it's sorted by result count. So Dina Loeb and Ann Rothberg were interviewers who worked with the Weitzman and conducted the interviews. And Zelda Morant had 6 parts. Bluma Bayek's 5-part interviews. You can change it to alphabetical again and sort it that way. And so these are all of the names of the people that were interviewed in this collection. I'm gonna X that out. So if you click on the title of the interview, that brings you to our universal viewer screen. This is where you can listen to the interview. I'm not gonna play it right now, but if you click this little triangle, that's the play button, and you can listen to the interview this way. I will say that unfortunately, you cannot skip forward or backwards in the playback in this viewer. It will only play straight through. You can pause it, but I recommend downloading the file. And if you can do that by clicking on the downloads in the lower left of the screen here. And you'll see I recommend the MP3 format. And if you click that, it'll download to your computer. You can open that up in Windows Media Player or QuickTime, which are the usual default media players on most computers. You can also listen on your phone. The mobile viewer will look slightly different, but it's essentially the same. And again, you just cannot skip forward or backwards in the playback, but you could listen all the way through. So I'm going to go back to the collection and some more of the filter on the right side, subject terms that I have entered. So these are things that I tagged. They are all tagged agricultural colonies, New Jersey, immigrants, New Jersey, Jewish farmers. They're all oral histories. Only some of them are, most of them are Eastern European migrations, but there were two interviewees from Germany. And so that's another subject heading. So Kurt Seiden and Sally Meyerfeld and their families, they came later in the 1930s and 40s to escape atrocities again, this time from Germany. Many became poultry farmers. And again, this is the area that Seth Stern's book focused on. I could probably have tagged Harry Levin in there as well, because he was a lawyer at that time, living at that time, and his interviews also touch on the German migrations at that time too. Probably some other interviews as well. But again, these were terms that I have chosen. I can always add more or change things. These are things that I put in there to help people find them. Some more tags are the places. Most interviews were from Alliance. There were a number of people from Woodbine as well. Those were the two main areas of focus of the exhibition. And other people mentioned the other areas of Carmel, Brotmanville, Norma, Rosenhayn, Vineland as well. There's some other subjects that I could have entered. Again, there were multiple mentions of Baron de Hirsch, Maurice Fells, who were well-known benefactors of the community. Several people mentioned the Chautauqua Society and Professor Louis Mounier. These brought education and culture and entertainment to the communities. Many people fondly remembered Chaim in America, a local peddler. And other families and friends, they mention each other. So you really see how connected the community is, either mentioning friends or people they remember growing up or people they're still in touch with. And there were several claims of first or second child or first girl or first boy born or first married. And I really wish I had kept better track of that, because I feel like that came up a lot and there might have been some overlapping claims about that. And from my aunt's interview, one of my favorite moments, they were sisters, and B says that their parents, Aaron Colton and Hanny Levin, were the first couple married in Alliance. And now I'm not sure if that's true or not. I kind of think it's not, because they were married in 1891. But so anyway, B says they're married in 1891, and Helen says, what? No, that can't be. I was born in 1900. I was born 9 years after they were married. And B says, yes, you were, because there were 5 children before you that passed away. And of course, Helen knew that, but you can hear the emotion in her voice as she remembers, and she says very quietly, that's right. They lost 5 children before I lived. And so it was really quite a different time. A lot of the interviews reflect a real reverence and admiration for their parents and their grandparents and the hard work and the lives that they must have had. And Helen says she wishes that they could have known the conveniences that we have now, the dishwasher, clothes washer, driving a car. They had nothing like that. Back to this website. Now, I said that there were 74 interview parts here, but this is showing 75 items in the collection. And that's because one of the items is the exhibition files that I mentioned. And so that is, here it is, Living on the Land exhibition files. And so this little section contains an artifact list from the exhibit, and these are PDFs from their files. There's an exhibition outline, that first page of which I had showed earlier in my slides. There's some installation photographs, and I'll click on that. Hopefully, yes, okay. I'm gonna X out the little attribution box, and I can make it full screen here. And these, and you can click through. Again, these are, photocopies of photos, but you can get an idea of what the exhibit looks like when you listen to these interviews. And the last item in this collection is a soundtrack transcript. And so I'm going to go back to my slides, hopefully, yes. And I'm going to play, I have a 3.5-minute clip. This is just one clip that I spliced together myself from several of these interviews, because this, and this is based on that one transcript, but that recording itself didn't survive or be retained in the same way that the taped interviews were. So I've tried to recreate this. That transcript is a script of several speakers with musical interludes, and I did include the music in my version, and not all of the speakers in this short version I tried to recreate for you. So this would have played on a loop towards the end of the exhibition in one of the final galleries. And my clip, you will hear the voices in this order, the voices of Gilbert Greenblatt, B. Harrison, Helen Maisner, Sam Stollop, Helen Baskin, Lois Decker, and Blumenbeek Rappaport Permel. So this is 3.5 minutes. I'm going to play this for everyone now.
Even with all the hardships and all the trials and tribulations that you had there, it was a thriving little town.
But by that time, 1918, many of the families that originally came had left the land.
I don't think anybody tried. I don't think you could hold the young people from coming in.
From leaving.
From leaving. I don't think you could do that because, and I don't think that anyone was motivated to say to you, don't go. I don't think there was that kind of feeling because everybody knew more or less and knew in their hearts that people would be leaving. Mm-hmm. There would be no way of keeping them. There was nothing there to keep them but farming, and farming was hard. And when you saw how easy living was in the city, you naturally gravitated to the city.
He was tied to the soil. He loved the soil. He figured someday I would settle there. He even bought more ground and chopped more trees down. He worked till he was 88. Everybody left and didn't come back. If they didn't come to the cities, they went to New York, Philadelphia, and wound up either in Vineland or Bridgeton, but not on a farm. You couldn't. It was hard life.
You never missed the farm?
And you didn't make enough money to keep you going. You had to resort to something else.
I have always said that I would like to go back to the earth. And I think that I think that kids who don't work in the earth miss a great deal. I really do. I think there is absolutely something about working the ground, putting nothing but a little dried thing in, and having the satisfaction of bringing something edible out is a fantastic, an absolutely fantastic experience.
My father always referred to the country as home. We used to laugh as a kid, and we'd say, "Well, what's Atlantic City? A temporary habitat?" And he'd say, "Yeah, well, home is Alliance," and he always referred to it as down home.
How do you feel when you go down?
Home. I still call it home. And I don't know why. I've had some beautiful homes in comparison to that. And I never felt rooted. I owned it, but I never felt rooted as I do down there. And I think it's because when you're born in a place and you are so close to the ground that the whole thing is part of you.
Okay. Back to my slides. Okay. I'm almost done. But I want to talk about transcription briefly, which adds another level of searchability. So when you perform a search, your keywords bring up relevant matches among the available data for the item. And this includes the title, the author, any of those subject terms or other information manually entered by the cataloger or the archivist, me in this case, that I showed earlier. Our digital library also uses OCR, which is optical character recognition software, that can search machine readable texts like typewritten or printed documents and newspapers, but it cannot decipher handwritten manuscripts or audio files. So creating a typed transcript and attaching it to the item allows for the entire content of the interview to be included in a search. So for instance, maybe you're looking for a particular person who wasn't interviewed, but maybe someone mentioned by someone else. A transcript might pick that up. If an item is transcribed, it will be noted in the format field. There's only a few so far, 6, I think, at this point. And to access a transcript, you would click on that download button in the lower left corner and in the digital library viewer screen. And you will see options to download a PDF or a Microsoft Word document of the transcript along with those audio downloads. If I go back to our digital library homepage, also the Weitzman is a featured partnership currently, but it's been up for a long time, so I'm not sure how much longer that will be there, but it is on the homepage. So if I did, again, I'm doing a live demo. If I search for Olam, which is that social movement among Russian Jews to establish agricultural colonies and go back to the land. Again, these histories tell that story. I'm not telling the history, I'm telling the history of the histories. But that Olam comes up in 2 transcripts, and I think probably more, but we don't have them transcribed yet. And it's, again, it wasn't a search term that I entered. But it's coming up in these 2 transcribed interviews. Another example, we can search for that Baron de Hirsch that a lot of people mentioned. And that's coming up in it says 6, but I think it's actually 3 interviews that have been transcribed. That's because it's recognizing the PDF and the Word document, so it's doubling that. But it comes up in 3 interviews and a lot of newspapers that we have in our scanned in our digital library. The Gaelic American is an Irish American newspaper that we have a lot of. And I looked at one of these earlier, and it's talking about a statue to Baron de Hirsch that was going to be put up in Central Park in New York, but I think that it was never actually built. And this Girl's Companion little newspaper is picking up an essay contest from a girl at the Baron de Hirsch School. So that's interesting that it comes up in those things. But again, it picks up more things when they're transcribed. So this is my last slide. No. Oh, how do I get back to it? I didn't mean to do that. Oh, geez. What have I done? Last slide. Here it is. Showing us. We're back to it. Okay, thank you. So on average, the transcription process can take 4 to 6 hours per 1 hour of recorded video or audio. It's a pretty tedious and time-consuming process because you have to keep pausing or replaying or listen at a slower speed as you type. And but we do have some tools to help. There's lots of talk of AI these days. And I have run the audio through a program called Whisper AI, developed by OpenAI, which is a speech recognition software. And it takes seconds to minutes to read the audio file and spit out a text document. But I suppose it's useful. It's super messy and it requires a lot of cleanup. You'll have to add the speakers' names in each line. There's some nonsense words. Sometimes it doesn't do well recognizing proper places or names. And it definitely did not do well with the many Yiddish phrases or words in these interviews. So I found pretty quickly that it's helpful to have some familiarity with people and places mentioned. For example, here on the screen, the whisper text is on the right and the finished transcript is on the left. And you see it's spelled Carmel, like the food caramel or caramel. And a little further down, you see caramel and roasting, which is obvious to anyone familiar with the area. They're talking about Carmel and Rosenhayn. So you have to clean up and edit those things. I put out a call on the Alliance Colony Facebook group. Again, another page set up by Jarrett Ross, which has been really great for connecting. And last I checked, there were over 700 members, which is pretty cool. And I was really happy when Charles Hacker reached out to volunteer. Charles has transcribed the interview of his mother, Pearl Hacker, and her sister, Shay Kotak, who before they were married were family Crystal. They're descended from Raphael Crystal and his son, Jacob. And Charles and I exchanged several emails. We talked over Zoom. I sent him the dirty transcripts generated from Whisper and a guide to audio transcription with tips and instructions for how the final document should be formatted. The transcriptions include endnotes, which can be added by the transcriber to help clarify people, places, and events, as well as indicating if they're unsure of a word or can't understand what the speaker is saying. Some other challenges with hearing the audio is that some of these interviews were conducted outside on a front porch, it sounds like, or sometimes there's a fan or air conditioning maybe and other background noises like dishes. if they were preparing or eating meals during the interviews, and people talking over each other. And the interviews with multiple people are especially challenging. So I want to end now. And if Charles is here, I want to invite him to say a few words about working on this project before we open it up to questions and a larger discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Charles.
Yes, I would like to start by saying I've always had an interest in my family history, and that's why I joined the Alliance Colony Facebook group to begin with. And you can only imagine how excited I was when I saw the post from Rebecca concerning the existence of these Weitzman Museum tapes that were done 46 years ago at that time. And to realize that there were tapes of my mother and two of her sisters. So I jumped at the opportunity to transcribe them, even though I had never done transcribing before, but I was definitely willing to give it a try. In fact, I felt it was important for one of the family members to do it. Rebecca mentioned how it is really helpful for someone with a personal connection and understanding of the people and places in the interview to do the transcribing, and I agree. First of all, transcribing is a tedious and time-consuming process, and one of the reasons I was willing to stick to it was that I wanted my family's story to be told and available to others, and I wanted it to be as accurate as possible. For example, already Rebecca showed you a few, but I'll just say, for example, the transcription software referred to my grandfather's sister as Denny, Denny, but I knew from family stories that that was Jenny, and I don't know if that would have been picked up otherwise. Also, the software referred to the person who ended up buying the farm from my grandfather when could no longer work it. His name was spelled Paizo in the software, and the actual name, I have the actual deed when my grandfather sold the farm, and it was Pizzo. Now, that may not seem like a major difference, but for someone who's researching, it can make a difference. And one final example, my mother and her sister, who is just 2 years younger, have very similar sounding voices. It's just that my mother's is a tone or two lower. And I had my own challenges, and I can only imagine what someone who didn't know them at all would have been able to figure out who said what. And I'll just end with this. Overall, the transcription experience was meaningful for me in a few specific ways. So if any of you are considering it, hopefully you will have similar feelings about it when you finish. It was really special to me because I was hearing the voices of my loved ones and I was picturing them during the interviews. And my Rebecca mentioned noises. Well, my aunt the whole time was making a meal for her and my mother and for the interviewer, and there were pots clanging and there was water running. But and one thing that I have to laugh at, one point she was talking about what she was doing in the kitchen, and she said, "Oh, isn't this microwave wonderful?" And then I thought, wow. Then I realized, I looked it up, that in 1978 they were just becoming household appliances. So that just had me, that tickled me in a way. But I also, of course, learned new information about my family. And generally, I learned about what it was like to live in that time in our society. And I was able to share with the generations after mine. There are two generations that I was able to share with that are ancestors. Academically, I felt like I was contributing to making these interviews available digitally, and that was a good feeling. So, Rebecca, I thank you for providing me with such a worthwhile opportunity at this point in my life. I'm 78 years old, And I never thought I'd have that experience. And I hope that many of you listening will experience the same. Thank you.
That is great. Thank you so much, Charles. And yes, if anyone else is interested in volunteering their time, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me, and we can talk about getting some more transcriptions up.
I think if we have a couple minutes for questions, Barbara raised her hand, so I should be able to unmute Barbara. Okay, Barbara, you should be good to talk. I think you need to click unmute too, though.
Unmute yourself.
There you go.
I'm sorry, that was an accident. I didn't realize my hand was raised.
Oh,
okay, no problem.
Hi, Barbara.
Hello.
There are some questions in the chat that I see. Leonard RF asks, where can I purchase another copy of Growing American, the Alliance Agricultural Colony in New Jersey? Is that Tom? Is that your book from the exhibition?
And Leonard, that's available on Amazon, but you can always write to me, thomas.kinsella@stockton.edu, and I can get you a copy from our stash on campus as well. Happy to do so.
And Keith Standard asks, please describe the process used to recruit Jewish families from Eastern Europe. Did the different colonies in southern New Jersey have different recruitment methods? I want to say that there were different, well, the Alliance Universelle was one of those benefactor organizations that help to bring families over, but I'm not sure that we know so much about how they came. But again, these are in that book that I had mentioned, that academic history. These tell the story. I don't know if Patty or Tom want to add anything else to that.
I'm going to jump in a slightly different direction, Rebecca, thinking about the folks online and the potential for transcribing oral histories. We've got about another 11 tapes from the Ellen Eisenberg cache of material that she sent to us last year that developed into that book. Those have been digitized and are available at Stockton through our website, but they haven't been transcribed. If anybody is interested in looking more deeply into this sort of companion to what Rebecca's done, we're always here and happy to get help from the community.
And I think there's another question about volunteering. So Deidre says, my daughter during college volunteered to clean up transcripts made for North Carolina Jewish Project. It's very helpful that she knew Jewish life cycle events and recognized Hebrew and some Yiddish phrases. It was a valuable experience. I hope volunteers can be recruited. By the way, she became a history teacher. Try contacting schools or synagogues. Yeah, that's great. And we also have a lot of interns that we use to do things like transcriptions and editing and things like that. And Tom knows more about that.
Yes, we do at Villanova as well. And I have considered using some of our interns or perhaps engaging history classes. We've definitely had students working on transcription. I first wanted to open it up to the community first and see if we could get any bites, but yeah, definitely student projects. We have plentiful work for students.
Rebecca, I wanted to congratulate you and thank you again for what you presented to us tonight. You know, this is your history of the history is an example of the promise of archives, it seems to me. There's something that was done in 1978, and while not forgotten, certainly not brought to the potential that almost 50 years later, you are now bringing it to its potential. That 3 minute and 27 audio clips that you put together was really moving. I mean, it's wonderful. Just I don't know these people, but I know these people when I hear that sort of thing, and I would imagine a number of people would have the same reaction. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's the tapes were there, they're being preserved, and this is just another step to continue their preservation and sharing it. And that's what we do. Thank you.
Then I think if there are no more questions, Tom, do you have anything else?
This is what we're trying to do at the Alliance Heritage Center, bring more awareness of the wonderful communities with Jewish farming in South Jersey, specifically Alliance Norma, Brotmanville, but Rosenhayn and Carmel as well, and others. This is a deeply rich history that we might be 5 or 6 generations from the start now, but there's still it still resonates in wonderful ways.
Okay, and thank you,
guess,
everyone. Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
If no one has a question, I was just curious if anyone had listened, and if anyone had listened or had any comments or just anything to share. And Faye, if we want to volunteer, who should we contact? I'll put my email in the chat, and that's for these interviews of this collection. And you can also reach out to Tom or Patty for what they have in their collection. Again, these are all different resources, but we're trying to bring them together. That's my email at Villanova. Oh, Wendy Peterson loves the Cousins Club pick. She's in B. Harrison's arms. Thank you, Cousin Wendy. Okay.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, you can always reach out to Rebecca or Patty, patricia.chapin@stockton.edu or thomas.kinsella@stockton.edu. We'd love to hear from you. We're also on the Alliance Colony Facebook page. Many of you I know are as well. You can find us there. Patty, anything else before we wind this thing up?
No, that was it. Thanks, Rebecca, and also Charles for your input, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Everyone
Have a good night.
Yep.